Welcome to Keep It Humane, the podcast, where we dive deep into topics surrounding kindness, compassion, and creating a more humane world, whether it's in our communities, in the workplace, or in the world of animal control and shelters. With our hosts,
Ashley Bishop.
And Ashley Bishop.
And I'm Daniel Ettinger. This show is sponsored by Tomahawk Live Trap. Check them out, livetrap.com.
Hello, it's the three of us today. I can't believe we have Wisconsin Bishop 2 weeks in a row not tending to any cattle up there in the snow. How you doing?
I'm over the weather. It literally went from 70 degrees to like 8 inches of snow in the course of 2 days. And I have some wild, excuse me, wild and crazy kittens in my office. So if you see me looking back, that's why, because I'm like, what are you getting into now? But this is the cat's room, so they should be fine to be playing in here.
I've been dead all week. I don't think I've had the flu for like 20 years. I can't remember being sick like this. It's
Welcome to my world.
it's so stupid.
Best epidemiological studies ever. They're great. I love it.
The flu? Or when you're
No, ships, being on a cruise, you're just asking for it, bro.
You go on a cruise? Is that where you got this from?
Yeah. I was on a cruise for a week and
it's a petri dish.
My dog's mad. So should I break the news to my kids that I'm never going on a cruise again? Is that like the
I don't do cruises for that reason and other reasons, but I say no to cruises.
I might have to start saying no to cruises. This thing lit me up like my dog he's really into this right now. I wish
people randomly go missing from cruises too.
Yeah, we didn't go missing. It was a great time. However, so I got back to California Sunday, and by Tuesday afternoon, I just started to feel it up here in the face. Wednesday, we had a awesome training with the ASPCA, actually. Shout out to the ASPCA. And it was outside, and I'm literally like shivering, freezing, and it was nice out. It was like 65, 70 degrees out, and I just couldn't do it. And the rest of the week, I've just been down and out. But I'm feeling a little bit better today. How you doing, Texas Bishop?
Okay. I mean, things have just been the weather's been crazy. We got a huge downpour. Shouts out to South Texas. I'm in Central Texas right now, folks, but back in my hometown, it is just no bueno. It just flooded and it's just, no. But other than that, we're doing okay. Just kind of, the weather over here is just nuts as always. It's cold, 45 degrees one day, and then it's like 92 in 2 hours. So
I don't get it. That's so funny.
I don't understand. And you over there with your beach walks with your dog, and I hate you.
I think I might do that today. I might go out to the beach. I'm 5 days in. I can go to the beach, right?
You're out in the world. It's not like you're sucking face with somebody and giving them flu.
Well, Tomahawk Live Trap is celebrating its 100th year of business in 2025. They're a family-owned and operated business who work with humane professionals around the world to help produce the safest and most effective animal handling equipment available. You can You can save 10% on their products by using discount code Keep It Humane. It's Keep It Humane in all caps. You can visit them online, livetrap.com, or call them at 800-272-8727. They just had a blowout, too, of some of the refurbished traps. I don't know if you saw that. Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that they did that.
Me neither.
Y'all need to pay closer attention, livetrap.com.
Not just us, everybody, because I bet very few people knew that. So
yeah, they had a huge sale on that stuff. So I just want to jump into it because this is going to be an amazing episode. Excited to have a returning friend of the show, Jessica Rock. If you don't know about J Rock, I don't know if that's what they call you. All the friends call you.
Do. Yeah.
Awesome.
State prosecutor, special assistant to the United States Attorney in Georgia. Jessica, she was on the show. You were on the show. Man, Bishop, do you remember like a year and a half ago, 2 years
It's
ago?
yeah, it's been a while.
Sorry for
We've been
keeping
at
you
this
away
for a
for
while.
so long. But I reached out because, I saw a lot of just a lot of stuff, and there's been a lot going on with this case out of Georgia where um, Vincent Lemark Burrell, 57 years old, was convicted or found guilty of 93 counts of dogfighting and sentenced to 475 years. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we really wanted to get you on to talk about that. And before we do, I think first and foremost, I don't know for our listeners, I think like the dogfighting case work is like the sexy, like movie style call that everybody wants. I don't want a dogfight. I'll just be honest. I don't want to ever work a dogfighting call if I don't have to. Um, there's a lot of work that has to go into that. And if you're not familiar with all the ins and outs, I mean, one little thing can mess up your case. So, Jessica, can you just briefly tell our listeners, those that might not have been listening a couple years ago when you first were on the show, a little bit about your background, and then let's just jump into that case.
Sure. I got started doing this work 20 years ago, so I have been, I guess, blessed, fortunate, or unfortunate, however you want to look at it, to have been prosecuting animal crimes for 20 years now, both on the state level and then I guess it's for about the past 4 years on the federal level as well. And I come from a background of working special victims cases. So for me, this was not something I solely did for most of my career. Most of my career, I was handling um, special victims cases, which includes domestic violence, elder abuse, child abuse. Um, Also on the other side of human violence, gang cases, drug trafficking cases, illegal gun cases. And so I have obviously seen in most of my career that these cases are never just about themselves. They're never just about the animals. There's always some other element, usually of violence that coincides with these types of cases. And that is a big part of what I try to get, not just our law enforcement officers to understand, but also our community as well to understand. I hear a lot of things when, especially in this case, I'll say that there was, I think, 99.9% of positive feedback from people about the sentence in this case that we're going to talk about. But of course, you have that 1% or 0.1% or whatever it was, maybe more like 0.1% of people that make these snide comments about how, well, this seems really crazy when we're not sentencing humans
Mhm.
to human crimes for that much. And, that just to me tells me that you really just don't understand the level at which we see these crimes connected to human crimes. And so when we do actually send a message because of a sentence in an animal crime case, we're also protecting humans in a huge way. And there's also, I think, a little bit of misconceptions about how the criminal justice system works and how we arrived at the sentence, which I'm happy to talk about. But I'm just grateful to be able to do this work. And thank you guys for what you do in, educating enforcement agencies, but also the public on how much of a problem it is and still is in the United States. So thank you.
And I want to make sure to highlight on what you said is like the ignorance of people when they say things like, well, this is it's just dogs, like who cares?
Yeah.
And what your experience and what people don't know is that connection between, violence towards animals or negligence towards animals and how that relates to people and all the other factors. So I I'm glad that you brought that up, and I hope people can see that through the work that you've done and or this case.
Absolutely.
But also beyond that too, to, because I know I've heard some courts say how ridiculous it is to take it for every single animal
Mm.
Mm.
when you have a particular case, that it's overzealous to do such things. And that in our world, no, it's not.
Well,
No,
you know, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, again, I do think when you hear things like that, it is a little bit of a misunderstanding about how we go about prosecutions, how we go about indicting cases. When we indict a case, there are times that if we don't include each of the animals in the indictment, a judge could decide to exclude evidence on account that's not included in the indictment. And so when we went to indict this case, and this is not a abnormal case. I mean, any prosecutors who go to indict a case are going to include the separate victims, so to speak, whether it's a human victim, it's an animal victim, it's, a murder victim, whatever it is, we're going to indict the case to be able to paint a picture for a judge or a jury about the actual facts of the case. So if we have, for example, a murder case where we have 3 humans who are murdered, there's going to be counts in the indictment for each of those victims. And it's just no different in an animal case. So it's not that we're treating these cases any differently. We are treating them the exact same way we do any type of crime. So I think there's just a little bit of misunderstanding about that. And the reason we arrived at a sentence for 475 years in this case, believe it or not, and this is another thing people don't understand, we actually, if we prosecuted somebody for 1 count of dogfighting, and there was 1 dog, which is not typical in a dogfighting case, but let's just say there was 1 dog that was a victim of dogfighting, that would only be a maximum in our state, in a lot of states, and even federally, of 5 years.
Wow.
And so, and obviously, if somebody is going to take responsibility for a crime, that's another element of this, right? So there's always a lot of pretrial negotiations that go on before we end up in a trial posture, and there's many opportunities along the way for a criminal defendant to take responsibility for their actions. And if they do, their sentence is typically going to reflect that.
Can I ask really quick if someone got caught cockfighting in your state, how long that sentence would be?
Same thing. Well, we don't have a cockfighting
I
law
know.
in Georgia. That's a whole
why
other thing that we can talk about that we're in the process of trying to pass. But federally, there is a federal law involving cockfighting, and that's a maximum of 5 years too.
Can we, just so people know this case, I want to back up a little bit. It started back in 2022, and
That sounds about right.
if I'm not mistaken, an Amazon delivery driver was the one who called it in.
Love
Yes.
it.
That's
Yes.
amazing.
You see
Yes.
something, say something.
So when you drive up this individual's driveway, believe it or not, there are neighbors around, and the Amazon driver was not the only person who ultimately spoke up about this, but when he first had the dogs out in his yard, which was still quite a few of them when this originally started, if you drove up his driveway, you could see right into his backyard. And so at one point, an Amazon driver did report that he saw dogs tied up on, heavy chains in the backyard, and had some concerns about that, and reported it. At some point soon after that, the defendant built a privacy fence around his yard, making it a lot more difficult for anybody to drive up in the driveway and see what was going on. So there's been a lot of questions about, well, if this was originally seen in 2022, what took so long to, ultimately conduct a search warrant in this case and make an arrest. And that's because he made it more difficult for law enforcement or other enforcement agencies, investigative agencies, to be able to see what was going on. But yes, it was originally reported by an Amazon driver, which, like you guys said, part of educating the community about how to identify a particular dogfighting yard is important. Dog fighters put dogs on chains in a manner close enough where the dogs can see each other but not touch each other. There's typically circles that develop. We call them chain spots, or what looks like crop circles that develop because these dogs are kept on these chains 24/7 unless they are removed from the chain to fight or to breed. And, you know, that is a sign of dogfighting in and of itself. Maybe not necessarily if you only have a handful of dogs tied up that way, but certainly if you've got a yard of 40, 50, 60 plus dogs tied up that way, they're not house pets. There's no other reason why you do that. And educating the community that that is purposeful to build aggression in these dogs. I think is highly important for the public to know. First and foremost, that is a number one sign of dogfighting that we look for.
Some of the people though that aren't familiar with how to investigate these may not know some of the resources that they have available. One of your biggest friends when looking into a dogfighting case should be Google Maps
Oh yeah, of course.
and utilizing the um, the street view and utilizing the satellite view and things like that. Checking with your state regulations on using drones.
Yeah,
You know,
what is the law there in Georgia for a drone flyover?
Well, so your drone flyovers, even though states are going to have some case law on this, you're still under a constitutional obligation to follow, to not violate the Fourth Amendment. And
Sure.
so when we talk about what is reasonable expectation of privacy, and that's the word, that's the term we use when we're talking about the Fourth Amendment, does the person have a reasonable expectation of privacy for whatever is contained on their property? And if the answer is yes, we likely need a search warrant. And I will say that there's a lot of there is case law out there on using drones. I will say my advice to law enforcement is if you have developed probable cause, that you should just get a search warrant to get a drone. And that's what we did in
mhm.
this case. You don't necessarily, depending on the certain facts of what you're dealing with, you may or may not need a search warrant to fly a drone over somebody's property. However, if you get to the point where you suspect that you're going to find evidence that is ultimately going to lead to probable cause for a search warrant or an arrest warrant, I do encourage law enforcement to go ahead and ask a judge for a search warrant to fly a drone over. In this particular case, we did get to a point where we believed that we were going to get into the questionable area of a reasonable expectation of privacy because we needed to fly a drone low enough to be able to see above or below the tree lines. In Georgia, we have a lot of trees, unlike some states, which is part of the reason why we have a lot of dog fighters here. We have a lot of wooded areas, rural wooded areas where there's lots of trees, lots of foliage on the trees. And so if we're going to get below a certain point, we're probably going to want to apply for a search warrant so that that's not as questioned later on.
How close was the closest neighbor to this house, to this property?
You know, honestly, I don't know
Okay.
wise, but close enough to where they were able to hear dogs barking
Mm.
and
Yeah.
have concerns about that. Yes.
Yeah.
I was gonna say some of these stories say 107 dogs, so I'm wondering how big is this property?
The property was pretty big and it starts up at kind of the top of the hill and dove down into there was a pretty steep drop off in the back. When we executed the search warrant, you just kept going and going and going and going, and there was dog after dog after dog after dog. There was a lot of them in his basement as well.
Can you talk about the levels too of all the participation? So like clearly law enforcement's involved. Did you work with any other outside agencies? Was it just like your local law enforcement, animal control? Like how did that process work?
There was multiple agencies within that county involved. So you had the sheriff's office, the marshal's office, the animal control officers were also involved and, heavily involved in the investigation. The DA's office was involved and the USDA OIG was involved.
Okay. Dang, it's a lot.
Did you guys need to, and you don't need to specify which one if you did, but did you guys reach out to any larger animal agency to help with the seizure and or caring for the pets?
Yeah, so because I am also a federally sworn prosecutor, although not in this particular jurisdiction, most of my cases have involved federal seizures, and the U.S. Marshals does assist with that. What was rare about this case is typically if we are investigating the case federally and we use the U.S. Marshals resources to seize the dogs, typically we are going to prosecute the case federally as well. In this particular case, the only reason that did not happen is because the local prosecutor, Casey Pagnotta, whose name is also very familiar to people as well, she really wanted to keep the case and she wanted to learn how to prosecute a dogfighting case. She's also very passionate about prosecuting animal crimes, and she had asked me and the U.S. Marshals if, she could prosecute the case on the state level, and that is why it ended up happening in that way for no other reason. So I know there's been some confusion about that as well, but certainly there is a state law prohibiting dogfighting. There is also a federal law prohibiting dogfighting. They are very similar laws. But the state prosecutor or the county prosecutor had just asked, for she and I to work on it together and to prosecute it within the county. And so that's why that happened.
And so, just so for people to research on their own, the federal law, is that under Title VII?
Yeah, 7 USC.
Okay. Just if people want to read it, if they want to Google it or whatever. Do you think the outcome would have been the same for 475 years?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, and that is part of why I am really glad that we did move forward with a state prosecution on this case, because in the federal law, federally, we would have been looking at a maximum of 5 years, no matter how many dogs we had for the violation of the Animal Welfare Act under 7 USC 2156. So the federal system just works very differently. There's a lot of benefits to prosecuting cases in the federal system. But in this case, it just turned out that we were able to get the sentence the way we did because this particular judge, and in the state system, we can sentence the person to the maximum and then run those counts consecutive to each other if they don't merge as a matter of law. These counts did not merge as a matter of law because they were specifically indicted for different dogs. So therefore, they don't merge as a matter of law. The judge ran them consecutively to each other, and that's how we ended up with the sentence that we ended up with.
So the real question is, how much time do you think he'll serve?
It's always difficult to say because there is still the appellate process. I believe his attorney filed a motion for new trial. Certainly, that's something that will be looked at. And then, if there's any other appellate things that could happen that could change this, I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, you just don't know what may end up coming up. I don't suspect that, there was any major issues, but you never know how appellate courts might see things. And in terms of the sentence, I am by far not the expert in trying to navigate what percentages people are required. There's parole boards that deal with those issues, and so I would never bet money or anything like that on what happens post conviction. I can just say that we were appreciative of this particular judge speaking out for the animals that were harmed in this case, and basically making a statement, a huge statement, after he sat there and observed the evidence in this case for the entire week that we tried this case. And I think the judge, I don't want to speak for the judge, but I think that he was aware of making or issuing this particular sentence, that it was going to make an impact and it was going to speak to how horrible this type of crime is, for many different reasons. So it's hard to say, but I don't anticipate any reason now why he won't serve a good majority of that. I forget exactly how old he is, but he is an older gentleman.
I think,
So,
yeah, 57. Yeah.
50, yeah, but I was gonna say I believe he's several years away from like being 60. I do believe that he will serve a good bit of that time, as he should.
Absolutely. Do you think there's a trickle down? So, like, if I'm a dog fighter and I saw this case, am I like, shit, like, I'm just done, I'm retiring, or I'm just going to try to be more like incognito? Like, hopefully I don't get caught. Because, like, it's, it's almost like equating it to like the mafia, right? Like they're still going to be criminals at the end of the day. It's just one of their lieutenants or one of their, people got caught. So like,
Right.
but do you think there is a trickle down effect at all? We saw that case out of DMV with what was his name? Moorfield, where he worked for the Pentagon. Like we're starting to
Yes.
see it crumble a little bit more. And what you said, I think you might have said it before we started recording, is like the Michael Vick case put notoriety in this country around how severe dogfighting is and how horrible it is. And it doesn't seem like it gets enough of the publicity as it should because of a couple things that we talked about, like the people don't understand the connection between human violence and animal violence. But I guess the roundabout question was, do you think we'll see a trickle down and people may start understanding that these crimes are going to be taken more seriously?
You know, what I have seen from people who are engaged in dogfighting is it is a sickness. It is an addiction. It is a sickness. It is something that a lot of these individuals either grow up in or get introduced to at some point of time in their, either their childhood or even in their adult life, and they just become infatuated with it. And once they kind of, get themselves involved in it in that sort of deep a way, I don't think they're just going to give it up because they saw somebody get, a sentence, a very serious sentence on it. I will say though, what I think is important is absolutely they are aware of it, and absolutely they realize that, we aren't going to stop investigating these cases. We're not going to stop prosecuting them, and we are making other people more aware of it. I think one of the reasons why dogfighters have been able to exist as much as they have is because you don't have the public necessarily calling 911 when they see a yard of dogs chained up with heavy logging chains. Yeah, they might be concerned, but it's not as much of they're not as aware of how much this is going on. So the public is becoming more and more aware of how much this is a problem, and they're talking about cases other than Michael Vick.
Mhm.
We do see dog fighters talk about these sentences in chat rooms. Um, so they are aware of them. They do hear about them. It does kind of spread like wildfire through the community, which, believe it or not, everybody seems to be tied to everybody in some sort of way, even though it's a national and international problem. They all seem to kind of know somebody who knows somebody else in dogfighting. So it is bringing about awareness, and that to me is huge. I don't think we're ever going to rid the world of dogfighting, just like we don't rid the world of people who do drugs or sell drugs or, you know, um, become involved as a domestic violence abuser, for example. We're always going to have criminals, but we're much more aware of other types of crimes than we are these crimes, and I'm just thankful for the awareness of it.
Yeah.
Do you, I mean, we all know that obviously he had to be having others to fight and gamble with and stuff.
Yes.
And likely there was more than likely drugs involved somewhere. Now, in the media, everybody's only talking about him. Are you guys able to look into some of the other people? Like, have you been able to make any other connections yet?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
I don't like to talk about any current or pending
Right.
investigations, but one of the individuals that was connected to him, and people don't realize this, but we had actually prosecuted him and he got convicted and went to prison as well.
Mm.
And that was a guy that was in Cherokee County by the name of Randall Thaxton. So Randall Thaxton was connected to Vincent Burrell, and he was prosecuted and tried to a jury before
Mm.
the Vincent Burrell case. So we had already actually prosecuted an individual that was connected to him. And yes, there's others, and yes, they're on the list. So,
Good.
um,
Man, you're a national treasure, Jessica. We got to do everything we can to protect you. This is like I just people don't realize the length of these investigations, and
right,
it, no disrespect to anyone that's just done like a small one, like whether it's a animal cruelty case or a dog bite investigation, like this takes, I'm sure this took quite some time for you and your team to put together.
well, and you always want to do it right too. I mean, I think there is some people who perceive the fact that, law enforcement and prosecutors just go after anyone and everyone, and that's not my experience being a prosecutor. I mean, we are going to get it right. We're going to make sure we have the evidence if we're going to move forward on any case, but especially a case that's less understood by the public. We're going to do a lot of proactive investigation on these cases before we decide to ultimately move in on a search warrant, and eventually arrest warrant and an indictment after that. So yes, there is a lot that goes into these investigations, often multiple agencies working together, especially if it's a big case like this where we knew who he was connected to. We know, um, kind of what he was doing, who he was communicating with, who he was selling dogs to and with, and breeding dogs with for the purposes of dog fighting. We knew a lot before we ultimately executed the search warrant in this case.
And that says a lot, though. Like, and that's one thing that I know the public doesn't understand, unfortunately. Just because you call it in doesn't mean we get to act right away.
Right, right,
Mm.
Um, and we've talked about it numerous times on the show. And even for some of the ACOs out there that are new to the field, like
right.
you need to be slow and steady wins the race. You need to gather all of your evidence and you have to, have a tight case because otherwise you're risking them going into the weeds and not being able to get the information you need. And then you can't, potentially prosecute again, double jeopardy and all that. So you need to take it slow and steady on these cases.
Yeah, and I will say I have lost a good bit of sleep sometimes, knowing that there's yards of dogs that we
Mhm.
have not gotten to as fast as we possibly could. I have lost a good bit of sleep, and there was one particular case. I am proud to say that we now have executed a search warrant on that case, and I believe a couple months ago we were finally able to gather the evidence that we needed to move forward on a particular case. It's pending investigation, pending indictment, so I'm not going to say who it is and where it was, but um, he had actually moved his yard of dogs from one county to the other before we were able to get to them, and went through a
Mm.
cold winter. And we just did not have, we obviously we knew what was going on. We knew he was a dog fighter, and we knew he had a yard full of dogs that we needed to save, but we can't violate people's rights in order to do that. And so we absolutely have to do it the right way. We have to gather the evidence. We have to gather it the right way without violating someone's rights. And that is oftentimes in these cases the hardest thing about them, knowing that you have a yard of dogs that you want to save and having to wait till you get that evidence. So I do want people to know I understand, especially coming from someone who does this as much as I do. I've definitely I've lost some sleep over that. But at the end of the day, it's not worth me saving them and having to give them back. That would be the
Amen.
absolute worst heartbreak I can imagine, is seizing a number of dogs and then having a judge tell me that you violated this person's rights and therefore these dogs are going back to them. That would be a much worse situation.
I was,
I,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Dan.
Um, I was looking at the address on the Google Maps or Google Earth actually, just because it's fun. And I always wonder, like, if I'm flying somewhere and I happen to like lean over and see cockfighting or dogfighting that I'm familiar with, like, is that enough? Like, if I'm in an airplane and I'm going to like a new, how would I even explain that to like the town's animal control? Hey, I
And
just
how would
flew
you
in.
even figure out the address, Dan?
Well, that's easy. That part's easy. Just ask the pilot what runway we flew in on, and then just backtrack it because you're not too far out from there. Um, but like, is that enough reasonable suspicion right there? If I see like you talked about the crop circles, or if I see like tie outs for how roosters are housed in a sense, like I know that's like a dream scenario, but can be considered enough reasonable suspicion just because I saw it from the air on a flight?
You know, these are the kind of questions I don't like to answer with not
That
knowing.
would be reasonable for a welfare check to be called on that property.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, it depends. So it's going to depend whether or not we're talking about federal law, we're talking about state law, we're talking about the law in your particular state that allows, certain things to be prosecuted certain ways. Now, obviously, everybody here, I'm talking about on this podcast right now, knows what game roosters look like. We know what a dog fighting dog yard looks like. Um, I will say that I don't believe that certain types of evidence in and of itself is going to allow you to get where you want to go. There are other things that you can do to determine whether or not that person has the intent to use those dogs or the roosters to engage in fighting. And usually that is what we're looking at under our law. So we can't just look at a yard of dogs, for example, that are tied up a certain way and say, we know that's a dog fighting yard, right? And I'll talk about dogs a little bit differently than roosters because there is some differences in those two different types of cases. But for dog fighting in particular, if I have a yard of dogs tied up a certain way, I can look at it and know what the purpose is of those dogs being tied up that way. However, that is not going to be enough for me to go get a search warrant and make a case. I'm going to need to build a case around what I know to be true.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I will say, if y'all go on Google search this case, I find it absolutely fabulous that it's just pictures of you, J-Rock, and your partner and the dog. It is absolutely fabulous and not giving this man any more notoriety than he deserves. And smiling baby shark over here is just
I
a
love that,
beautiful
man.
pup. Beautiful pup. And it's just so good to see, that you were able to bring them in into the court, and it's just beautiful picture. Absolutely beautiful.
Do you go out to the scene? Or you like, will you go?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I go on all of the search warrants and cases I'm involved in. I just think I try to teach other prosecutors the importance of doing that too, especially if you're a specialized prosecutor who handles certain types of cases. I believe that it really helps you be able to relay to a judge or a jury when you're showing photographs and showing videos, when you were actually there on scene yourself. I think it makes a world of difference in how you're able to present that case. Not to mention, I also help them identify what they're looking at because sometimes there's law enforcement officers that it's the first time they've ever executed a search warrant in a dogfighting case, for example, and they can be looking right at something and not even know what it is. And so part of that is me helping them identify what it is that we put in that search warrant that they were looking for to search and to seize and making sure that they gather the evidence the right way. But even if it's experienced law enforcement that I go with who have obviously worked these cases with me multiple times, I still think it's helpful for me as the prosecutor to go so that I see it for see it for myself, and it makes it easier for me to relay the facts to a judge or a jury
And
or both.
I think it's good too for the investigators out there to have you there to ask questions too and say like,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, to
that
be a resource for them. Because
absolutely.
their crime scene, I don't in any way, shape, or form. I tell prosecutors all the time that's not you're not the one leading the crime scene. You're not the one in charge. You are just there to assist, to be a resource, and let them, let the enforcement agency do their job so that you can do yours.
This interview's gone way too fast. I'm like,
I know. Honestly, though, like it's great to get your perspective, Jessica, because I am lucky enough to have a great prosecutor who has unfortunately now moved up to judge. But man, she was phenomenal. And I mean, it's so great to have somebody like that in the courts on your side, because I know a lot of us in animal control or just the animal welfare industry in general, it's a real big struggle for us to even get the littlest things done. So kudos to you and all the work that you're doing, especially for the industry. You're a rock star, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you guys. It takes a village. I know my face is all over the place, but and it just happens to be because, like you said, we took that one picture in the courtroom after sentencing, and but there's so many people, in Georgia and all over the nation that are really working hard to combat these criminals that are engaging in this disgusting behavior. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who does put time and effort into investigating these cases, prosecuting these cases, bringing awareness to them, just like you guys are doing. Um, I do get a lot of credit, and I do appreciate that, but there are so many people that have worked alongside of me for so long, and I just want to thank them too.
shout out to them.
Yes,
All those
all
people.
those.
It does take a lot, and that's really cool. And we really appreciate you taking the time today to talk about this case. I feel like we'll still see more and more of this as we go. And um, as our listeners, whether they're currently in ACO or they're in law enforcement, like these cases, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica. They're actually easier than most people think. You just have to
Oh, for sure.
you just have to want to do it. Like it's not. I remember. I don't know if you ever got to work with David Hunt before he passed away out of Ohio. He worked for the Ohio Department of Ag as an investigator. Worked for the FBI for a little while. Was a homicide prosecutor detective. I'm sorry, for a while. But one of the things that he said it on the show before he passed away, but he said it in training too, was he would often go to um, sheriff trainings. There's a term for that, like chiefs and sheriffs trainings, and talk about dogfighting. And the pushback he would always get from these chiefs and sheriffs was, well, you can't do anything unless you catch them in the act of actual dogfighting. And he looked at them and he said, look, I investigated homicides for 21 years and had a pretty high success rate, and never once did I catch somebody murdering somebody in
Hey,
the
what?
act. Yeah, yeah,
At
absolutely.
least with that specifically, like, come on, what kind of not? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but that's a really good way to say it. And I wanted to just touch on one of the things that you said about these cases are not as difficult as you would think. There is so many online trainings, in-person trainings, conferences, not just here in Georgia, but all over the United States for people who are everywhere and internationally. But you can get online and find a webinar on these issues. I know Justice Clearinghouse does
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
ASPCA has some great information on their website. HSUS, now Humane World for Animals, has a fantastic law enforcement division that does these trainings across the country. I mean, all you need to do is get online, find a webinar, watch the webinar on dogfighting, on cockfighting, on animal cruelty investigations. There's tons of information out there.
And
Tons
a
of
lot.
organizations that provide this information. And I do believe that once you identify some of the things that goes on in these worlds, it's really not hard to then see it when you're investigating cases. All of these trainings that I do here in Georgia and nationally and even internationally now, it's not the it's not it's not difficult to gain the knowledge very quickly about how to investigate these cases. You just have to want to, and you have to be open to understanding what it is you're looking at. There's been so many times when we've done trainings, and afterwards I've had somebody, a sheriff's deputy or a police officer, come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, well, I just had a case not too long ago where I saw all of these things and I had no idea what I was looking at, but now I do." And that's all it takes. That's all it takes is literally going to one day of training
Mhm.
and familiarizing yourself with what goes on in this world, why they do the things that they do, what type of evidence you're going to find in these cases, and why they have these things, why they communicate the way that they do. And so just educate yourself. Just go to one day training, take one webinar, and you will then understand how to properly investigate these cases. And then you can help other people within your county or your state know those things too. And it takes a lot of times in a lot of places, animal control officers and law enforcement officers working together. Not one agency calling the other agency and saying, "Hey, there's dogs here, so just come get them." Things like that. Like, we've got to change that mentality,
Yes,
you know?
yes.
And when you do change that mentality within your county or your community, things really do start to change with these cases. I've seen it
Yeah.
a lot of times. And so that's just, the conversations I think we need to continue having.
And one thing I
Absolutely.
want to add to that is the webinars are out there. The majority of them are even free webinars
Yeah.
open to law enforcement. And if you still are not confident or you feel like you just need that little bit of extra help, a lot of those agencies you talked about, HSUS, ASPCA, places like that, they have a whole legal team that is there to help
Yes.
support you and
Yes.
walk you through it. 9 times out of 10, it's not going to cost your agency anything to call them and ask for support. So there are resources out there to help you get through this. And then once you learn how to do it, then you can help the other local agencies around you.
Bishop, I need to help you. It's no longer HSUS. It's
You're right.
How do you even do it?
HW.
HWFA?
There you go.
That's going to take some time.
It
Jessica,
is.
wonderful episode. We really, really appreciate just everything you do and just talking about that whole process. Was there anything that you wanted to make sure our listeners knew before we wrap it up for the day?
I no, honestly, I just want to thank people who I'm sure everyone who listens to your podcast cares about these issues. And if they want to know what more they can do to help, it is literally educating other people. I even tell my friends, like, we'll be sitting around just having dinner and I'll let them know about certain things. Hey, if you see this or, you see that, this is when you need to call me or call somebody to do something about it. And I just think the more we talk about it, the more we know who our resources are. And if we see something, just say something. I mean, that's what I tell. It really is that simple. I mean, it really is that simple. And just call 911. The other thing that I always tell the general public who has questions about this, and by the way, we need our animal control officers and our law enforcement officers also encouraging people, call 911. If you see something that concerns you, don't look for a non-emergency number. Don't look for necessarily an animal control number that may not be manned by an actual person if it's 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. Just call 911 and report it, and then let the investigative agencies take it from there. So that is one thing I like to let people know. It's okay to call 911 to report an animal crime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Bishops, y'all have anything before we wrap it up? I want to take a nap.
I
I'm
know,
so,
I just feel better.
thank
I
you.
just want to say thank you for keeping it humane, Jessica. And because I think what you're doing is going to say a lot to prosecutors everywhere and everybody
Mhm.
being able to utilize this as a stepping point of stepping up their game
Yeah.
and getting
Yeah.
these things prosecuted. So thank you.
And for any prosecutors out there who just want to talk about a case, I mean, I'm always available as a resource too. I mean, and for any law enforcement officers, animal control officers, I am available as a resource. I mean, obviously that's my job here in Georgia is to serve as a resource for everyone here, but anybody across the nation who wants to talk, I'm certainly open for that. Shoot me an email.
Have you, I guess last question, can you be an expert witness? Like, can people call you and say, like, we need you to help testify on this case?
I've never testified as an expert witness in court. That's something I typically leave to my law enforcement officers. I certainly like doing trainings. I guess I could potentially testify as an expert witness in court, but I definitely have people that testify for me as an expert witness that I can connect you to, that have already done that multiple times if you need an expert witness, people that I've used in my cases. So I can certainly be used as a resource to connect you to them.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for taking the time today
Yeah.
and sharing all that great insight. We really appreciate you. And I think we say here, it's been a while since I've been on this show. I'm telling you,
Uh-huh.
being
Yeah, you've been
sick,
leaving it to us and it's been chaos.
being sick and being on a cruise. Thanks for listening and continue to help people.
Yeah. Y'all
Help
take
animals.
care. Hope everybody has a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Jessica. Keep it
Bye,
human.
y'all.